Hi, Don.
Hello, Thomas.
Well, I'll begin with acknowledging that we are located and situated on the traditional unceded territory of the Nanaimo Nation. Here in Nanaimo, we're at Unity Center. And for all of their thousands of years of nurturing and taking care of this land and teaching us the oneness and the unifying force of this land, we are truly grateful. For that, we say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Haichka.
Haichka, yeah, nice.
Mm.
So, thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for having me.
I know I wanted to discuss with you the growing venture that you're interested in, but why don't we start with an intention?
Certainly. So my intention for this time together is to share what is meant to be shared so that it will bless any who come across this broadcast. And knowing that this broadcast is guided by Spirit for the highest and best of all concerned, I say thank you, Spirit. And so it is.
Thank you. Thank you. So I know you have this, I know from a while ago you started this venture with growing your own food. And is it, I think it's teaching people to grow their own food as well, yes?
It's actually a combination of the two.
Okay.
So the business is called Vanisle Vertical Farms, and we grow food for the Nanaimo and Oceanside communities in these vertical aeroponic towers. But we also can sell homegrown smaller towers for people that want to grow their own food. So our goal is we just want to see more people enjoying local, fresh, nutritious food. So if you want to grow your own, great, we can help you do that. And if you say, that's too much work, we'll grow it for you and deliver it to you each week.
Oh, wow. And I guess I have a few questions about this. Actually, I have a lot of things that come up. So, like cost, a starter kit, or is there big kits or small kits that you can buy for this? What's the setup time to set this up at home? How much space do you need? How long does it take for food to start being produced as you're growing? So why don't we start with that, just to try to give people a picture of hey, I wanted to do this at home. What does that look like?
All right, certainly. Well, I'll give you a little bit of the background, first of all. So a couple of years ago, I went to an event in Nanaimo called Nanaimo CD Saturday, which is actually coming up in a couple of days from now, and I'll be at that event. And at that, I saw one of these things. They're called a tower garden. It was a vertical system for growing food. My wife and I live in an apartment or a condo, so we didn't have a backyard, but I was really intrigued with the idea of growing our own food. And what we do have is we've got a really nice south-facing balcony. So we get lots of natural light. Mm-hmm. We just didn't have a way of growing food because we didn't have a garden. So I saw this thing, fell in love with it. There was a friend of mine that actually had one, so I borrowed it and said, well, can I borrow yours? And she wasn't using it, so I said, can I borrow this and try it? And in terms of size, you're looking at, these things are, the one that I had was 30 inches in diameter.
So that's the
So 2.5 feet.
Okay.
So, and they actually have a little bit smaller one now, which is 2 feet by 2 feet. So basically 4 square feet of growing space is all you need.
Oh, wow.
And depending upon the model, you can have between 20 and up to 32 different plants growing in that little amount of space.
Okay.
So this is an aeroponic system, and the difference between aeroponics and hydroponics, hydro meaning water, means that the roots are always in water, which means they can be drinking all the time.
Okay.
So those systems tend to use quite a bit more water. Aeroponics means the plants are actually suspended in the air. And there's a reservoir in the bottom where you put your water and your nutrients. There's a little central tube, and what happens is there's a pump in there which pulls the nutrients and the water up, and then they cascade down over the roots.
Okay.
And it's set up on a timer system, so the timer basically ensures that the plants get watered and fed at an appropriate frequency. So it's a really simple little system. And with that, because it's in the air and they can only drink when the water's flowing, it uses 90% less water, actually 98% less water compared to a traditional agriculture where you're growing in the ground,
right,
and even 70% less than hydroponics.
Okay. So
it's a really efficient system for growing. And what we loved about it, or at least I loved about it, was the fact that now I actually had a way of growing at home, even though I was in in a condo.
Right.
So what we did is I got one, put it out on our balcony, grew for during the. Now here's the thing: I had never grown anything before.
So you're not Mr. Green Thumb, is what you're saying.
Definitely not. That's why I was borrowing someone's before I said, I don't even know if this is going to work. So I borrowed a friend's. I didn't even know how to start really. So what I did is there's this company in Manitoba where they'll actually send you the seedlings already in little Rockwell cubes.
Okay.
And all you got to do is just pop it into your tower, which is what I did. Super simple way of starting. The other way you can start is you can actually go to the nursery, buy something, bring the plant home, take all of the dirt off of the roots, and then put the roots into this little cube called a Rockwell.
Okay.
So it's an aeroponic system, meaning there's no soil.
Okay.
So this is a soilless growing system. And over the next few months, I grew all kinds of greens, herbs, peppers, small watermelons, strawberries. You can grow basically anything except for root vegetables.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of different things that you can grow. And basically things like lettuce, kale, spinach, those kind of things, once you put them in the towers, usually within about 3 to 3 weeks, you'll have something to eat.
Okay.
So then there's other things like some of the berries, those take a bit longer. So it might be 6 to 8 weeks before you have anything ready.
Okay.
So, but each time you plant something, you can find out exactly roughly what the time period is before it'll be ready. So you can say, okay, if I want to have something, say in March, when should I be planting it? So I'll have it available.
Okay.
And so we had it out on the balcony during the summertime. And then in the winter, when it got too cold, we just rolled it into the spare bedroom, put a set of lights on it, and continued to grow right throughout the year. So it's a really neat little system. I fell in love with it. Once I found out that I could actually do it, much to my surprise, I went and purchased one of my own. And as I said, I got the nice small little one. The one that I borrowed fit on our balcony, but just barely.
Okay.
And I couldn't even get by it because it was so tight. So they come up with a new model, which was a little bit smaller, designed specifically for apartments. So it was only 24 inches instead of the 30. And that gave me just enough room to be able to scoot by it and still have access to the rest of our balcony.
How tall is it?
It's about 5 feet tall.
Okay. That's the small version or the big one?
That's a small version.
Okay.
And you can actually you can add a couple extra levels to it. So you can go up to about 6, 7 feet. And then they have the commercial ones for growing food, which is what we're doing in our greenhouse in Coombs. And those ones are about 8 feet tall.
Okay.
So the small ones are designed for, the tower gardens are designed for growing at home. And then they have tower farms, which are designed for growing commercially for a community.
Okay. Wow. And so what kind of cost is somebody looking at to get into an apartment size and then the slightly larger one?
Yeah, so the one that I got is about $800, and then the lights, if you want to get those as well, so you can grow year round, is about $400. Okay. So it's roughly about $1,200. When I got mine, they had, and they still have, a nice little 12-month interest-free program. So I got it. I was paying $110 a month. At the end of the year, it was mine.
Yeah.
And then once you actually have your tower garden, you'll spend about $20 a month roughly on your seeds, your Rockwell, which is what the seeds go into, and your nutrients. Right. So basically $20 a month to be growing your own food is pretty low cost.
Pretty low cost. And so just trying to get some context around, how much volume I could expect. So let's say hypothetically it takes 3 weeks to grow some kale. How much kale am I going to be able to produce on one of these? If let's say I just made it all kale, would I not even be able to eat what I produced because there'd be so much?
Unless you're snarfing down kale almost like around the clock, yes, you probably would be able. You'd probably be growing more than
snarfing of kale. I am a kale snarfing machine.
Yes. So unless you were doing it around the clock, you'd probably be growing more than you could actually consume. Okay. It's amazing how much food you can actually grow in these.
Okay.
And each port, remember, nature is constantly trying to expand. So as long as you're working with nature, the plants themselves just want to grow and produce. That's what nature does. So actually, what I found for myself, the thing that I was not so good at was the harvesting.
Okay.
So I love to look at it, and I'd be picking stuff off, but sometimes it would start to get to have too much on it, and I would have to get more aggressive with the harvesting.
Right.
Because it was growing faster than I was consuming it.
Wow, okay. So now for something like kale or lettuce, once you clip, does it regrow or do you have to start over again from like? Does it?
Yeah.
Will it continue to?
You can
flourish?
do either. It depends upon how you do it. I mean, if you do a sort of a harsh, cut it off at the base kind of thing, then it'll basically if you do a cut and regrow, it will regrow within 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Now, if you want to harvest the whole plant, now some things you can't do that with. So like a head of lettuce, that won't work.
Right.
But if you have arugula or other things, then you can clip it and it will regrow.
Okay.
So you can do either one, depending upon what you want. What we would typically do is we would just go out to the balcony. If we were doing a salad that night, we would just sort of pick off some leaves, put it on the plates, and then take it into the house and enjoy it that way.
Right. What has surprised you the most about it?
What really surprised me was how easy it was.
Okay.
As I said, having never grown anything before, having no gardening experience, I was really quite leery as to whether I'd be able to do this. So what really surprised me was just how easy it is. It really is a simple system. The other thing is a lot of people like gardening, but gardening can actually be fairly physically demanding. So getting down, weeding, it can be physically demanding. These things are at the height that you are. There's no weeding involved.
Right.
Because it's not in the soil. You don't get pests generally because pests generally come from soil-based systems. And the harvesting is, you just reach out and pluck something off. So it was from an ease point of view, from a comfort point of view, it's a pretty nice system.
Okay. And so what's the most adventurous you've been in terms of growing? Like I'm thinking, have you tried growing celery or tomatoes or?
No, I haven't tried to grow celery. I have done tomatoes.
Okay.
There are some things that didn't work. Like I'm trying to remember now. It's been a few years ago because I haven't been growing everything, but I'm trying to think what was something that I tried that didn't go so well. I can't really think of anything. Almost anything that I tried, it might have had less of a yield than I was expecting.
Okay.
But there was almost nothing that didn't grow.
Right.
It's just a question, maybe not quite as well or as much as I would have.
Didn't provide really anything worth talking about.
Yeah. I mean, these systems are pretty simple. You plant a seed and then nature does what nature does. Right. Right? So as long as you're providing sunlight and water and nutrients, it's going to grow.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the analogy you made that nature just wants to expand and grow, because I've always felt that way. Well, not always, but since being in Unity, I have felt that way about life. That life just is constantly looking to be more of itself and to create more of itself. And so with something like this, you get to see it really firsthand and actually participate in that. Because I'm as a kid. My dad loved having a garden and loved having tomatoes, but his idea of gardening was that I should weed it, and I didn't want the garden because I have no interest in weeding, and so I have never been someone like yourself. I've never been someone to really get excited about the idea of gardening. I've always been like, why make work for myself? Although the benefit of having food, especially now with the costs of food and some of the policies that are coming in place that are driving up the cost of food, having the ability to grow certain things on a regular basis that you can just have on a daily or nightly basis, something like salads or kale or anything in that format that you can grow and nurture your family with on a daily basis,
right.
I think
it is. Yes, that's food security.
Yeah.
And we tend to forget we do live on an island, and we're at one point we used to grow 70 to 80% of the food that we consumed on the island. Now it's less than 5%. So we're very dependent upon things coming across on these ferries. Of course, sometimes the ferries don't run because of storms or supply chain issues. I remember a couple of years ago we had a big ice storm. And the grocery store was closed because it didn't have any power. Yeah. And people were going and they were standing at the like, what do I do for food? Yeah. Like, you get food at the grocery store. That's an option, yes, but what happens when that's not an option? A side story to that is that when
I used to do workshops and seminars on finance and money, and one of the things I used to talk about was the idea of having a safe at home with a couple of different currencies. Like even up to 3. Let's say Canadian, U.S., Europe, or if there's a place that you travel to, like Mexico or something,
Right.
Pesos, having those available as currency in the safe. Also having some gold or silver readily available, but not big bars of it, little tradable pieces of it.
Yes.
And an interesting story about that is that storm we had about, I think it was 4 to 5 years ago, wasn't it? Where things, I have a friend on Main Island where everything was shut down for almost 7 days. And he was a client, and he actually took my advice, and he was able to go to the store and purchase because he had a supply of cash. Because none of the bank machines were operating with no power. The stores were willing to sell, but they couldn't run cash machines. They couldn't run debit or credit cards. So you needed to have cash in order to actually make a purchase.
Yeah.
And you don't think of these things till they happen.
Right.
Right.
Now, the one disadvantage of this system is it does require power. So if the power is out, then you'd basically have to be manually watering the plants every so often to make sure that they were getting their nutrients, because the pump wouldn't be running. So with the system that we have in our greenhouse, we actually have a backup system. So if the power goes out, there's a battery system. It immediately kicks in, and we've actually tested it. It happens so quickly that the pumps don't even notice it. They just continue operating.
Right.
So that system would run for a couple of days.
Yeah, and the lighting would be an issue unless you have the advantage of an area where you're getting true sunlight, right?
Yeah, and lighting isn't as important because they'll still continue to grow. They'll still get some light. They'll just grow more slowly if they're not getting supplemental light. But without the nutrients, as I mentioned, in the wintertime, we'd move it into the office or into the spare bedroom, which was also my office at the time. And because this was at the time when we were doing Zoom calls, remember when we were doing Zoom and all those, and we were all at home and not able to go anywhere. So I would turn the pumps off because you could hear them in the background.
Right.
And I would do my call, and every once in a while I would forget to turn the pump back on, and I'd go out, and when I walked in, and the plants would all be drooping. It'd be very clear. Yes.
Help us.
It's very clear that I forgot to plug them in. So it happens pretty quickly. So, but here's the other thing is I noticed I really enjoyed being in the office. And there was 2 things I realized. I loved the sound of the pumps in the background. I'm an Aquarius, so flowing water was probably good for me.
Yeah.
But the other thing is there's 32 plants behind, and we're doing this exchange. I'm breathing out, and they're giving me oxygen in exchange. So I was in this really oxygen-rich environment in the office, and wondering why I was feeling so good.
Right.
Right. So
it was like my experience when I go to the forest. I always feel far more alive, vibrant, enthusiastic when I go for a walk in the forest and I get home. And so you were actually creating this in your own office space.
Yeah. So the Japanese have forest bathing. Without knowing it, I was sort of doing plant bathing, which is much the same thing. It's being in nature and enjoying the benefits of fresh oxygen from the plants. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing all that.
No, my delight.
And so if somebody was interested, was watching this and interested in something like this, how would they contact you?
They could just go to our website, vanileverticalfarms.ca, and our contact information is there.
Okay. Is there a hyphen anywhere in the Vanisle?
No, just VANISLE verticalfarms.ca, all one word.
Great. Well, thank you. Now, one of the things that we had passed some emails back and forth leading up to this, and I thought, as I shared with you off the top, this is the most prepared I've ever been for one of these. Don Giberson, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, do you want to be on the show? Yes, but I have a bunch of questions that I need to know first before coming onto the show. It was beautiful. And you sent me some ideas, which was actually really great. I really appreciated getting that because it just gave me it actually gave me a moment to sort of look back and go, oh, okay, here's how we might be able to have a different kind of conversation than what we normally would do. And I thought if you brought up a really great idea around this, and that was the idea that you feel, if I have this correct, as though you've been called to do this.
Yes.
There's like
Yeah.
a call, and so the limited amount I do know about you is I know you had a radio show for a while where it was about sustainability. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I still do that. So
Okay,
yeah.
you still do that, and you also work or have served on boards around sustainability. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so talk to us about that. How is this a calling for you, or what makes you think it is such?
It's more a matter of the theme that I kind of suggested for today was the idea of when spirit calls, because I feel that this is what spirit is calling me to do at this time.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly not what I was expecting that I'd be doing at this stage in my life.
Right.
Most people are trying to get out of farming at the age that I'm at as opposed to getting into it. So I had never, if you had asked me 5 years ago, I could never have imagined that this is what spirit would be asking me to do at this time. And I think it's probably fair to say that you had your own calling a few years ago, which has led to a very different change of career for you.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe just talking about that notion of, how do we work with spirit, or what do we do when it calls, and what does that maybe look like and feel like for different people? So for me, it was, as I said, in terms of how I got involved with this, was when I went to this CD Saturday event a few years ago, and it's like this thing just spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw it, I just fell in love with it.
Right.
The idea of growing our own food at home, even though we were in an apartment, just really appealed to me. And tried it, was surprised at how easy it was. There was actually a gentleman that I was introduced a couple of years ago who had a farm, a tower farm, growing commercially.
Okay.
And invited me to get involved at that time. And the timing just didn't feel right. And then a couple of years ago, he contacted me to say that he and his wife were moving back to California. Did I want to purchase his equipment?
Wow.
And I just took that into prayer. And it's like the answer was immediate. Yes.
So if I were to put this in my terms, it's like there was a knock on the door and you were like, no, I'm not ready for this. And then there was another knock on the door,
Mm-hmm.
to which at that point you were able to go, yeah, I'm in.
The time is right. Yeah. And it just felt very right to do it. It took me about a year to actually find a place to get set up. That was the thing that was probably the biggest delay, was actually finding a place to do it. Mm-hmm. You can't grow food just anywhere, especially if you're trying to do it in the city.
Right.
There are only agricultural zones, obviously, are allowed, but the other place you can grow, at least indoor, because this is indoor growing, these are towers, you can do it anywhere, you have to be in an area that's zoned industrial.
Right.
And there's not a lot of industrial land in the city of Nanaimo. So I did actually find a place. I put in an offer on it, and it was just about to close. And then I came across this place in Coombs. And as soon as I saw it, I said, this is where I want to be. Because otherwise I would have been inside a box, growing full-time with artificial lights. I said, no, this is a greenhouse where I can have natural sunlight through most of the year and just supplement in the wintertime when there's not enough natural sunlight.
Right.
And that just felt I said, once I saw it, I said, that's where I want to be.
Right. That felt
and it
felt
just fell right. It fell right into place. It was almost half the price of the place I was looking at, with far more space, like an acre. It was just check.
Right.
Check all the boxes.
Right. That's great. I can, it's interesting, this idea of spirit calling, because I know for me, I can hear the voices of old friends, people I used to go to school with, that would not, this kind of conversation is just not their cup of tea, right? There would be like, whatever. Right? And so I can see the rolling eyes, and I can hear the voices. And yet when I take that within myself and I think, I don't know why I wanted to play drums. Like, of all the instruments I could have played, and I tried to play guitar and I tried to play piano, just never did it for me. But drumming was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. When I was looking for, a career in my life, and I was contemplating getting married and having children, I saw an ad for Edward Jones, and I was like, I have to do this. It was the weirdest thing. And I knew nothing about finance. Like, it wasn't like I went to school and graduated high school and went to college and went, I'm going to, major in finance and go into that It was just something I had to do that I was able to launch myself fully into. And I still love it to this day. Like, I still find the markets fascinating. And yet at the same time, all of a sudden I find myself at Unity, don't know how I got here. And then boom, I have this desire, like, I want to know more about that. And I know that I can call it, spirit is calling me, and I can just go, hey, you know what? It just works for me. Like, I don't need to label it. So I'm curious, when you speak of that, of this is, spirit calling, what does that mean to you?
I think spirit is to me, at least the way I sort of view it, it's almost like radio waves. We're sitting in this room right now. There are radio waves all around us. We don't see them. We don't hear them. We don't know that they're there. But if we get a radio and a receiver and tune it to the right frequency, all of a sudden we're receiving what's always broadcasting.
Right.
And to me, that I think is sort of an analogy. Spirit is always working with us and broadcasting to us, giving us information, guidance, support. It's whether or not we're able to hear it or not hear it, receive it, because it's not always coming in the way of hearing. In fact, my own experience was I'm a fairly visual person.
Okay.
And I wasn't seeing things. So I just concluded that, well, I guess I'm not very plugged in. I'm not receiving guidance. And I was doing coaching, and one of my coaching clients, who was a Doreen Virtue certified angel therapy practitioner, and she came to one of my workshops and she was talking to me and she said, "No, you're very plugged in." And I said, "But I don't see anything." She said, "Yeah, but that's not the way you receive guidance." And I said, "Well, tell me more." And according to Doreen Virtue, there are 4 different clairs, 4 different ways that people can receive guidance. And most of us receive in one of them. We can receive in more than one way, but one is usually predominant.
Right.
And the 4 different ways are, some people are clairvoyant, meaning they see things.
Yep.
So they might get, their guidance comes in the form of dreams, or they'll see an image, and that will be the way they receive the guidance for them. Some people are clairaudient. So they hear things. They will actually hear something, maybe a voice inside their head, or it might be a song on the radio that will speak to them in a certain way, or someone will say something and that will jump out. And I've had that experience where that's been the way I've received guidance.
That seems to be more for me.
So that's your primary.
A lot more audio and vibrations for me. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then the other 2 that Doreen Virtue talks about is clairsentience. Some people feel like they'll feel it in their body. If something feels right, they'll feel maybe lighter. If something's wrong, they'll feel heavier or pushed down in some way. The 4th way, which was my way, is claircognizant, meaning knowing. So there's 2 main ways that people that are claircognizant receive guidance. One is they will just know when something is right. And that's me.
Right.
There will be times that I will know stuff without knowing how I know stuff.
Right.
Or the other thing, which is a big one for me, is ideas.
Okay.
Like, I'm constantly being bombarded with ideas. Like, I'll wake up in the morning, and before I get out of bed, I'll probably have had 4 or 5 ideas of how to make the world a better place. So part of my challenge,
in Don's opinion,
in my opinion, yes, in my humble opinion, yes. So part of my challenge has been, okay, that's not for me. That's not for me. Oh, that's one that I'm supposed to work on. So sifting through all these ideas to find out which ones are mine to work on. So coming back to speaking with Denise, my friend and coaching client, she said, I was looking for things to come in a visual format because I'm a fairly visual person,
right?
But it was coming in a different format and I wasn't noticing it.
Right.
And once I realized that my primary way of receiving information was in the form of claircognizance, of knowing and ideas, then that I've been getting guidance all this time and haven't realized it.
Right.
So one of the reasons I wanted to share this on this particular program was because there may be other people who are looking for or receiving guidance and not realizing it because it's coming in a form that they're not expecting.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, thank you for that. That's really helpful, because I have when I've thought about this in the capacity of some people who can see things, I thought, well, I'm just not that guy. So I guess I don't have any awareness, right? Because that's what most people seem to sort of talk about, or when you, when you go get your cards read, or like palm reading, like all of that stuff seems to be, I'm getting this image of right? And I'm like, I don't get images of things. But when I hear something and I know it to be, I'm bang on. And then you mentioned another one, Clairsentience, I think, that the gut feelings.
Right.
Like I know when something feels off for me, and I know when something feels on for me, but I never considered that to really, be
Right.
that element of spirit talking to me. And I also really appreciate your idea of the frequency, because you're absolutely right. There's vibration, frequency moving all around us constantly, and I think it was Tesla that said, if you want to think of the universe, think in terms of vibration, frequency, and I forget the third one.
Vibration, frequency.
We're going to pause here for a moment.
I'm not sure.
Vibration, frequency, and you know what? I have to look it up now. I can't.
But to me, the interesting thing is, when we look at the 5 principles of unity,
Yep.
there's only God. God is expressing individually through each of us as a unique individual expression of God. And all of the other ones, to me, those totally line up with what quantum physics is saying.
Right.
There's only energy. Everything is energy
That's the third
vibrating
one.
at a different frequency.
That's the third one, is energy.
Okay.
Energy, vibration, and frequency.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And that's what quantum physics is saying. Well, how is that really that much different than there's only God?
Right.
God is expressing in all these multitude of different ways, each of us being a unique expression of that.
Yeah.
To me, science and quantum physics are saying the same thing, just in different language, using different languaging.
Yeah, and I've thought about this a lot too, because there's the idea of how can I support these ideas in the world of science, right? Because there's a lot of people that say, well, that science has discounted that there's a God, right? And I'd say, yeah, that's true. I don't believe there is some dude somewhere labeled God that has supreme power over everybody and goes out and destroys people because they're angry at them. So yes, I would say that that's accurate.
Thou shalt be smitten, you bad sinners down there.
That's right.
Yes.
And maybe I'm about to be smitten for what I'm saying, but aside from that, I do believe that there is a God presence that is the substance of life itself, that desire, as you started off with, that nature, life wants to expand. I believe that is that essence that we're trying to put our finger on, or we're trying to get an understanding of. And I think you're absolutely right that quantum physics is showing us that's the soup that we live in, right? And so how do we, as knowing that, how can we use that to, I don't want to use the word advantage, but to our own leveling of consciousness, or our own uptick of consciousness? And I think you illustrated that by starting off with an intention, right? Like you had an intention coming in to this. And when you start with something like an intention, you actually are calling in that energy and that spirit to move something forward.
Yes. And, there's I don't know the exact verse, but, the idea that God made us in his image, if I can use that languaging. I don't believe, personally for me, I don't believe that means that we look like God, but we were created to create because the creator is a creator. So we've been given creative faculties. By using our mind and imagining and setting intentions, we are able to create things. For good or for bad. Yeah. The power can be used however we want to use it. There is no judgment there. And so for me, when I came into Unity and started learning about this whole idea of mind action and the fact that we can actually create our world, it was pretty exciting. It was also kind of humbling because it meant, well, then I have to take responsibility for what I've created so far.
There's that,
There is
unfortunately,
that,
right?
yes.
There's that, well, if I'm the creator, then how is it my life is looking the way it does right now?
Right.
Yes.
And I was actually led into it shortly after I got into, well, I guess it wasn't shortly, but I'd been in Unity for a while. And I was doing my coaching, and I was aware that there was a piece that was missing, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Michael Lozier. He's the author of a book on law of attraction that came and spoke at our church. And as soon as I heard him speak, I said, that's the missing piece. It's really the law of mind action, but the mainstream was calling it law of attraction.
Right.
And it's been taught for thousands of years in different forms. But the basic idea is we create our own reality through the power of our mind. So I went and took the training with Michael Lozier through the Global Law of Attraction Training Center. Started to actually do a course through Unity, had a bunch of people taking it. And the next thing I know, Michael actually leaves the Law of Attraction Training Center to go around the world promoting his book. And I was asked to join the Law of Attraction Training Center as a faculty trainer, as a faculty member. So I spent the next few years actually training new coaches on how to become Law of Attraction trainers and coaches.
Right.
So it was really, and the thing is, I had never set this intention. It was just noticing, here's what I've noticed. My life is amazing when I'm willing to say yes to what shows up. When I notice what's pulling at me right now, and am I willing to say yes to it?
Right.
And that to me is sort of like what I've learned is how to gauge when spirit is calling, and I sort of have my own little criteria, I guess, if you will.
Okay. Yep.
And usually for me, the best sign that it's spirit is calling is when I'm excited a lot and scared at least a little.
Yeah.
Because the excitement is spirit wanting to pull me into this exciting thing, but chances are it's also going to involve some growth, moving into some areas that are outside of my comfort zone.
Some discomfort is
so the discomfort
along for the ride.
There's a little bit of that. If I really tune in, there's a little bit of that. It's not overwhelming, but there's usually a little bit there that says, there's a growth opportunity here, or there's a healing opportunity here, or there's a learning opportunity here that's part of the package. So that's one example was I'd been coaching for a while, and someone approached me to be part of a Power of Coaching movie. And they had a couple of different well-known coaches. Not that I was a well-known coach, but they had a couple. Yeah. And so I was invited to take part in this, go in, check in. And yes, I'm feeling, but I'm also really nervous.
Of course.
Because I do coaching, but it's on the phone.
Right.
Like, I'm not in front of the camera. I'm not doing this is a step for me because I'm usually behind the camera. I'm on the phone. No one's seeing me. There's that comfort level there. And now here I was going to be doing a video and being on a movie, and oh boy, that was pushing all kinds of buttons for me. Right. But yet I also was feeling very drawn to do it. Yeah. So it was exciting a lot, but there was definitely a little bit of fear in there as well. Yeah. So I found for me, when those two things are present, with the excitement usually considerably heavier than the fear, that's usually a sign that I'm on the right track.
Right. That's a really great piece, I think, that you just shared, Don. The idea that we can be excited about something, and at the same time, we can have trepidation, and we can be a little bit like, really? This feels so uncomfortable to a certain degree. And then to realize that that's something we can lean into as opposed to running from that. And it's not easy to do. I get it. Because when I think about, just even offering this up as an opportunity and saying, hey, I'm going to host these broadcasts, and, I have no training to be a reporter of any kind to do this. It's just something I feel like I could do that, but I was scared of it at first.
But you've been a podcast host, so that idea of interviewing people, maybe not in front of a camera, but you already had that experience.
Yeah, and even then I didn't have any experience. It was just like, I think I could do that. And then who do I think I am? It, comes back at the exact same time, right? As soon as I say it. So I get that. I get that feeling. And I think it's important for people to see that just because you're a little bit scared, it's okay.
Well, here's the other thing is after I'd been doing the Law of Attraction coaching for a while, I was kind of wondering, I was on the pathway I'd already graduated and I was doing the coaching, but I was kind of wondering, does the world really need another Law of Attraction coach? I mean, there's lots of them out there. And as soon as I asked the question, what happens? Someone shows up, I did a class, and at the end of the class, one of my students said, I really like the way you explained that. And that was just a confirmation for me is we need more than one coach.
Yeah.
We need more than one financial planner in the world. We need more than one minister in the world. We need more than one, right? And in part of my training, there was something called the Being Attraction Plan. And the idea being is when we are doing what we are meant to do, we will attract the people that are the right match for us and only us.
Yeah.
And the person next door doing exactly the same thing will attract the people that are right and perfect match for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So there really is no such thing as competition.
No.
When we are truly aligned with what we're meant to do, we will attract the people that we're meant to impact or interact with.
Yeah.
So I really like that idea, that there is no competition. All we have to do is do what is ours to do.
Well, one of my favorite books, The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace D. Wattles, 1909, published. He talks about that, the competitive plane and the creative plane. And not to be on the competitive plane is a no-win game. You want to be on the creative plane, and the creative plane says that, and I had never, before I read the book, I never knew this, but it kind of says that you do you. Right. And so that'd be
a good t-shirt.
Yeah. You do you. Yeah. Don't worry about me. I like that. Yeah. We should get those t-shirts. Unity. You do you.
That could be misconstrued.
Yes, it could be. This is a whole other world that you could go down with that. But here's what resonated with me about that is that as a musician and somebody who was in bands where we wrote our own material, we did our own CDs, and we went out there slogging it instead of doing a cover show, right? Instead of doing a cover act. I always felt way better just thinking, we're going to go play our music, and there's going to be people that will be attracted to what we do, and there's going to be some that can't stand our band, and that's okay. I would rather do that than try to be something and chase something around like a dog chasing its tail with no clear direction. The direction we're traveling is we're going to do the music that inspires us. And for me, with ministry, one of the things I struggled with in school was this idea where they really wanted you at times to come up with, well, what is your ministry going to be? And how are you going to attract an audience? And I'm like, well, because I'm just going to do it the way I think it should be done, my creative flow. And either people are, if 5 people show up and that's all that ever show up for it, clearly there's a message to me there that maybe I shouldn't be doing ministry, right? And so I really appreciate that. I find that's the best way for me to operate, is to put my creative flow into something and let the chips land where they're going to land.
Yeah. And, I had sort of a similar experience when I was first starting out as a coach. And I was in Toastmasters for a number of years, and that's where I sort of get interested in the whole idea of coaching and training. And I did a workshop called the Speechcraft, which was an 8-week program. And what I got to see in that was I got to see the way people transformed over the 8-week period, starting really nervous and scared about speaking, and then being relatively calm and confident at the end. And I want to be part of that transformation, the moving from A to B. So I realized I didn't want to be speaking, because you give a speech and then everybody goes home and, well, did anyone get anything from that? There's no feedback loop.
Right.
So for me to feel complete, coaching, I get to see, hopefully, if I'm doing the job right, I get to see a progression over time.
Right.
So when I first started, I had one of my workshops had like 5 people in it, as you said. And I thought about canceling it, and I checked. Spirit says, no, you're meant to do this, even if it's only 5 people. One of those people became a client, and the reason she said was because you did the workshop, even though there were only 5 people. That said to me that the service was more important than the money.
The showing up and being adding value played. I've so being in an original band on tour with no radio or record label support, you learn to embrace whoever is there.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I had to learn very quickly that counting the audience members was not a good thing to do for my own health, my own mental health. Because if you do that, you can be like, oh man, there's like nobody cares about us. Why are we even here? There's like 5 or 10 people out there. But instead turning that into, you know what, I'm going to go out and give those 5 or 10 people the best show I could ever give.
Right.
And then they're going to leave that going, telling their friend, you should have seen the band we saw last night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think you should ever mail it in at all.
Right, yes.
Like if there's 2 people, you serve those 2 people, and that's what you do.
Yeah. The other thought that occurred to me is when we were talking about the sort of setting intentions and following the guidance, there is another piece that is what I found is I need to look at the parts that I'm scared about. Because if I focus on that, I'm going to attract someone that's going to reflect that back at me, and then I'm going to have to deal with it. So this came about one time where, like, when I was in my 20s, and if there was anything about God, religion, soul, it's like, get away from me. I want nothing to do with you. And then like 15, 20 years later, I'm teaching this stuff. So it's like my journey has been so far from where I was at that time. So one time Margaret asked, how can you be okay doing these workshops and talking about soul and stuff like that? Aren't you worried that someone's going to be, and I said, no, because I'm okay with it. If I'm okay with it, I'm not likely to attract someone that's going to be for that. Now, if I was uncomfortable with it, almost guaranteed I'm going to attract someone who's going to reflect that back at me so that I can look at it.
Yeah.
So in that particular case, what I find is if I look at what am I uncomfortable about, and if I lean into that and work on getting comfortable with it, then I won't attract someone to reflect it back to me. The other thing is in my workshops, I'd often say, I'm just going to share what's working for me. If it works for you, great. If not, set it aside. I'm not here to convert anybody. So I gave people free will to accept or not what I was saying. So there was people were free to make their own decisions. But that piece about looking at the parts that we're uncomfortable with and leaning into those and smoothing those out, because if we don't, law of attraction says we'll probably attract someone that's going to reflect it back to us.
It's going to challenge us
so
on
we can
it.
look at it.
Yeah. That's really good. That's really good advice. I like that. I like the idea of seeing it as I've often shared, and Reverend Patricia has, is to see it as a growth opportunity, right? Like, what is here for me to look at? And I think as I think about that, I think you're absolutely right in that when you have, especially if you're in a role of, I'll dare use the word leadership role, if you have things that you're uncertain about, things that you don't truly believe, they're going to show up and really force you to look at those things. I kind of look at it like also, when I was on the road to becoming a minister, there were moments where it was almost like, oh yeah, you say you want to do this? Well, let's see, how bad do you want to do this? And, putting stuff in front of you that is really questioning so that you can actually deal with it and then leave it. Yeah. Right? Leave it behind so that it's not going to affect you going forward.
And isn't there, I don't know, is it Job? The thing that I feared most has been visited upon me, or something like that?
Yeah.
And from a spiritual point of view, that makes sense. Whatever we give energy to, even if it's pushing it aside because we don't want to look at it, it's going to attract it to us. I remember when I was just sort of starting out in law of attraction, and at one point I was looking at my bank account and I was looking at the future. I said, I don't know where the money's going to come from.
These two things aren't matching up, man.
So that I'll do a workshop. I think I was doing a teleclass at the time. So I'll do a teleclass. So I prepared this teleclass, marketed. No one registered. I said, okay, this is law of attraction. Like I set the intention. Why did no one show up? And then when I looked at it, I said, my dominant emotion behind the intention was one of fear and lack. No money. I need to do this because I need money. It was the lack consciousness that attracted no one's showing up. So I looked at that, did the working, releasing that fear and the worry, offered the exact same workshop to the exact same audience with the exact same marketing, and wound up with a full class.
Right.
And the difference for me, the only thing that changed was the place that I was operating from.
Yeah.
Now it was about being of service, imagining a full class and the joy of
The energy.
Yeah, the energy,
the frequency,
not worrying about the money,
the vibration.
letting go of the fear, and worrying, just trusting that, okay, if this is what I'm being called to do, trust that people will show up. But it was amazing, as I said, same marketing to the same people with the same message and completely different outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was chuckling a little bit because you just reminded me of something when, when I was training in insurance sales. And, because I'm licensed to sell insurance, which is like, I think most people are like, you like, get away from me. Right? As soon as you say, hey, I sell insurance, they're like, but there's sales breath, right? When all you're driven for is the sale, people pick up on that. People they inherently know that there's something not quite right with this, and they won't buy, right? Whereas if you're going into it with the full intention of serving and doing exactly what is best for those people, and you're very clear that that's what you're doing, those meetings go amazingly. Even if there's no sale at the end, when they do have a need, they'll come back later because they left with a feeling like, there's been times where I'm like, this doesn't work for you. After a meeting, you've had a full conversation with somebody, and you can look and you go, this is not what you need right now, and I'm not going to sell it. You can go somewhere else and get it, but I'm not going to be responsible for it.
Right.
And I think that goes a long way to not only gaining their trust and confidence, but also yourself feeling good about yourself.
Right. Yes.
Like, I don't want those feelings within me. Like, I've been duping people all along.
I've found for myself, if I start to focus on money as a motivator, it all goes to shit. Because that's not what makes my boat float.
Right.
Right. So when I try and make that what drives me, it just doesn't work. So I have to sort of let the money side go and tune into, is this speaking to me? Who's going to be served by this? And if I come from the place of serving and doing that, then hopefully the money will take care of itself. But if I make that the primary goal, I'm out of sync with myself, because that's not what drives me at a core level. Now, there are those for whom money is a big thing, and they would be out of integrity if that wasn't the first thing possibly they were thinking about. But for me, it's not.
Yeah.
So, that idea of what really motivates us. And again, if the idea is that Spirit is expressing in a unique way through all of us, what resonates with you might be different than what resonates with me. What drives me will be different than what drives you.
Yep. And
it's perfectly okay if different people have different drivers.
Yeah.
Because we need it all.
And it's not to say that money's not important.
No, no.
But I'm the same. I'm not so much driven by money, but money's important to me.
Yes.
Like, I do have that awareness that, hey, if I want to feed my kids, I need to have some flow through the bank account.
Or your own tower garden.
Yes, or my own. That's true. Back to the tower garden. Yes. But no, that's perfect. That's beautiful. But I have listened to so many podcasts and read or listened to so many audiobooks on building a business, and people like Jim Rohn, people like Tony Robbins, like a lot of these so-called gurus in the world of high performance and self-starting and creating your own universe, so to speak, that the one thing that I have pulled away from all of them, especially when it comes to if your bank account isn't matching what you would like it to be, the place to look is, how many people are you serving? How many people are you actually giving value to? Because if you're doing that, creating value for others, solving problems, coming up with ideas, like if you think of, Steve Jobs, the beautiful thing about Apple was he created something people didn't even know they needed till he created it. And then it was like, I need this. Yeah. And as a result, look at how the sales went, because so many people were served. And you can argue about whether the iPhone's a good thing or a bad thing or all that stuff, whatever. The point is, he served people with something at a huge level that just drove the sales. And so I often think of, like, even with ministry, if you want to grow your ministry, how many people are you willing to serve and take care of and be of value to? And unless you're willing to do that, it's not going to grow.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So how many people are you willing to feed with your garden towers, Don?
Yeah. Well, here's what I found is I have to be a little bit leery of that, in that if I start to have these, if Spirit has big plans for me, that's great. If I'm imposing big plans on what Spirit has planned for me, that's not necessarily so great. And I've had my own experiences where Spirit gave me an idea, I started to walk with it or run with it, and then I brought my own idea of where it should go, and that's when things usually would start to go awry.
Right.
So part of it for me is coming back to what is Spirit calling me to do, and if I trust that, then that will lead me to where serving the right people and the right scale and all of that. I mean, I would love to see this grow bigger. I mean, my vision is to have tower farms all up and down the island. Van Isle vertical farms is my thought, but maybe that's not what Spirit has planned. Time will tell. So I find that the other thing is, and I kind of blame Hollywood for this. You know, we were talking about Spirit and call and that kind of thing. You notice a typical Hollywood movie where there's a calling. The calling is usually to save the darn world. It's a big calling. It's if you don't do this, all mankind is doomed.
Spider-Man.
Neo or Spider-Man or whatever.
Matrix,
right? Yeah. And it presents the idea that Spirit callings are these big, huge things. And you can't not say yes, because the world will be doomed if you don't.
Right.
And I've come to the belief that at the realm of Spirit, there is no big. There is no small.
No.
There's only what is yours to do.
Yeah.
And we can't judge.
Well, we can judge.
What we can judge. Yes.
I don't recommend it.
Yes. So as an example, my mom had Alzheimer's, and at a certain point she was nearing the end. And I went home, and one night I was just sitting with her, and she was really agitated. And I could tell she wanted to go, but she was scared. And I remember I just was holding her hand, and I was just stroking her hand and said, "You are safe. You are safe. You are safe," or something like that. She passed that night. And I believe that was part of my purpose on this planet. A little thing, but that if I hadn't done that, my journey here would have been incomplete, whatever else I might have done.
Yeah.
Was that big? Was that small?
Or you may have been presented another opportunity.
Or another opportunity.
Because I find that that's also true, is that when we miss something we're kind of intended to do,
it'll circle back, maybe.
We end up kind of going around in a circle and finding ourselves back in a similar place. And now it's time. And did we learn in that journey? So there's things we're going to learn and get to know about ourselves if we're paying attention. And then we're going to end up sort of back in that spot with the opportunity to redo it. But and it's not good or bad, like, oh, I should have done this earlier. It's that maybe you weren't ready. Right. And you actually needed to go through that process of development and understanding so that you could get to this place. And now you're presented with a very similar opportunity for you to show up at a level you didn't know you could.
Yes. And I also, at least part of my belief is Spirit won't reveal more or ask us to go farther than we're willing to go. Like, maybe Spirit has huge, huge plans for you or for me or for someone else that may be listening. Yeah. But where Spirit wants to take us is just too big and scary if we actually saw the whole picture. Yeah. So it'll only show you that this next little step. So if you'll do this, so Thomas, if you'll just enroll in the ministerial program.
We'll see what happens
next. We'll see where that goes. Yeah. If you'll just start these tower farms, we'll see where this goes, right? Because Spirit won't reveal the whole picture because it might be too scary for us, you know?
Well, you kind of said something earlier, too, that I think is really important, is that as soon as you decided that how it was going to go, Spirit kind of, the idea got ruined, right? And so we can put our expectations on things and get very cavalier, carry a lot of bravado about it, like, I'm in charge now and I know what I'm doing. And then we end up pushing and demanding to go in the wrong directions, as opposed to something that you shared off the beginning, which was, this idea came to me. And so I took it into prayer and I sat with it is like, is this really for me? And then it was like clear, yeah, it is. So let's go. Let's invite it in. When you were talking earlier also about the idea of they don't have to be big ideas, what came to mind was in my own household, my wife, who has an acting career and had an acting career and had a really great agent and had plenty of opportunity. And we had kids, and there was a day where she went to set for a show, and she sat in a trailer, and it dawned on her in that moment that, somebody else is raising my kids right now, while I'm sitting here in a trailer waiting to go shoot something, and I don't want that. And so, she chose at that moment to put the career aside and focus on our kids and homeschool them. And for those that know my children, they're awesome human beings. They're really good. And I give a lot of that credit to my wife for doing that, for having the idea that this is actually where I can add some huge value, and it's really important. And just taking that and running with it, right? And it wasn't saving the world. It was actually being an influence on two souls, right? And we don't know who they're going to touch as they move in their circles and as they grow. But from that, calling for her, there's a really good stability that they've seen for themselves.
Yeah. And can I get really woo-woo for a moment?
Yeah, sure. Let's go woo-woo. We're going, people.
Yeah,
we're going woo-woo.
We're going woo-woo. We have a friend who had 3 children. 2 of them had a condition which saw that they not live generally past their 12th birthday. So at a certain point, the children became non-verbal. They couldn't communicate. So the only way that she could communicate with her children was to learn how to communicate with them non-verbally. Well, it just so happened her sister taught channeling and all of these different things. So she took a course with her sister, learned how to do this, was actually taking some other courses and learning some new skills. And she needed some people to practice with. So we said, sure, we'll do a session with you. So I sat down with her, and she started to tune in. And she said, oh, we have some visiting energy today. So she tunes into this energy, and it's someone that I don't know. I didn't meet them in an official capacity. It might have been something like seeing someone in a grocery store and we made eye contact.
Right.
But whatever that was, it had such an impact upon that person that when they were in spirit form, they made a point to try and get back in touch with me through our friend Diane. What was it I said or did that impacted that person in my physical life? I have no idea. I remember a story from Chicken Soup from the Soul where someone had just cleared out the locker and they're walking and someone bumps into them and scatters the books all over the floor. And another kid comes along and helps them pick up their books. No big deal. But then the story goes on and we find out that that person was planning to commit suicide. They just cleared out their locker.
Wow.
And because of that little gesture of friendship, they decided not to. There is no big. There is no small. Yeah. When we truly allow ourselves to be an agent or a force, the smallest little word, the smallest little gesture can make a huge difference. And we may never even know the difference that we made. I don't know who that person was. I don't know what I said or did to make some kind of a impact on them. But clearly there was something. Woo-woo.
Thank you. I think we'll leave it there.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Don Giberson, thank you so much for coming in.
Thomas, thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me as a guest. It's been a joy.
And out there, enjoy the rest of your day or whatever it is you're doing after this. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Namaste.